Namaskar, this is Akhilesh Bhargava. Welcome to Tit-Bits on Business and Finance with me. The downfall of the growth rate of the Indian economy has coincided with receding fortunes of many Indian companies and the collapse of several of them, some of which used to be leaders and icons in their own segments in their heydays at that point of time. These fallen corporates include the likes of ILFS, DHFL, HDIL, CG Power, Jet Airways, Alok Industries, Sterling Biotech, RCom, Bhushan Steel, Videocon, so many others. It is no coincidence that there has been a simultaneous downfall of the Indian economy and of these corporates. In fact, according to us, the downfall of each has fueled the downfall of the other. If the economy receded, so did the corporates, and because the corporates receded, the economy faced a downfall in its growth rate. These very corporates at some point of time were shining stars of India Incorporated. At that point of time, they showed a very rosy picture. That rosy picture was false. It was a farce. It was funded by debt based on a lot of bogus statements. And when that farce could not continue any further, they simply collapsed. These were fraudulent corporates with a rotten financial position, and it is no surprise that they all had to collapse. Let us examine these fraudulent corporates of India, this rampant fraudulent corporate culture in India, their downfall, and the impact that they have had on the Indian economy and the society at large. These fraudulent bogus corporates, according to us, had a lot of common features. The first one, these corporates and their promoters had deep proximity to the center of power. It is this proximity which gave them all the goodies that they got by way of loans, by way of the system colluding with them and overlooking all the violations and criminal misconduct that the promoters of these corporates conducted. The deeper that these promoters had a connect in the system, the bigger was the fraud that they could commit, the more blatant it was, and they got away with it for years. In fact, a nexus was built between the Baniya, the Babu, the banker, the Neta, and of course, the auditor. This was the first common feature. The second one, of course, these bogus financial statements, these bogus profits, these bogus performance and growth that they showed was an outright collusion between all the authorities concerned, whether it was the independent directors, whether it was the auditors, or whether it was even statutory authorities who were aware of this kind of a fraudulent misconduct but condoned it. The third one, none of these bogus corporates were actually viable. They had no viable business model. They had no viable or genuine operating cash flows. Their cash flows were completely actually debt coming into the system, hidden as profits. As long as the debt came in, they were able to run the show. And the day the debt stopped, they also collapsed. In fact, they got the debt by hoodwink and cheating the entire system. But as I said, there was collusion for them to do so. Since these companies depended on loans and debt for the purpose of showing their shammy situation and rosy picture, and to build up all the big balance sheets that they did, they all had their fraudulent bankers, the likes of Chanda Kochas, tucked away in the system somewhere, and they also had auditors like the Deloittes to sign their bogus financial statements in order to hoodwink the system. That made all these promoters and companies cronies of the system. That was the next common feature that they had. Their entire structure was founded on debt. It was a sham, it was a fraud, but they were cronies of the system. And the entire system benefited from this giant sham that was conducted. And the last feature, according to us, of these fraudulent corporates was that the bigger the defaulter, the bigger the billionaire he became. They took big loans, and to the extent of the big loans they took, they also defrauded the system by siphoning away the money. They made their companies poor, they became rich in the process. Thus, the bigger the fraud, the bigger the billionaire promoter that got created in the process. It is this system which generated these giant fraudulent corporates, these giant shams. It is this system which generated this kind of a growth in the economy, which itself was bogus, and that has caused immense damage to the economy and to the society. Let us examine why do we say so. So what was the impact of these sham bogus enterprises on the Indian economy and our society at large? The first one, please remember, these were sham enterprises. Their audited financial statements were false. So the turnovers, profit, growth and contribution to our GDP that they showed was also false. And the day they collapsed, that point of time, their contribution to the GDP also collapsed. Thus, it showed that our GDP growth which occurred because of these entities was not truly correct. The second one, the jobs that they generated were again a farce. These jobs had no durability, and the day these enterprises collapsed, those jobs actually never came back. And that perhaps explains the rising unemployment that we face in India today, just as the depletion of our GDP growth has been because of those sham turnovers that we talked. Because of this business model in India, if we call it, no viable or durable enterprise really got set in India. We have missed out an entire generation to build world-class entities. Our companies were not strong enough to withstand market competition. Their profits were such that they never struggled for them. They managed to get money on the tap. Bank loans came to them because of proximity to the system and not because of an inherent merit that they had. Thus, to that extent, we have missed setting up a larger number of world-class enterprises into this country. We never have really had durable enterprises that could transcend generations because of their inherent merits and strengths. Because of this system, where the undeserving took away the resources of the country by way of bank loans, public money, etc., the deserving ones were deprived of money, they were deprived of resources, and that explains why we have dwarf enterprises in the country today, as the chief economic advisor says. The genuine ones never really got what they needed, what they deserved. The big fraudulent ones took it all away, and to that extent, we've had a generation of worthy entrepreneurs not being able to meet their potential because the system support never came to them. And then this entire business model, as we call it, built a white collar criminal section in society. This white collar criminal sect has been a very powerful one because they had nexus to the powers that be. They colluded with the system colluded with them. And these white collar criminals have actually cheated the country of huge opportunities, and they siphoned away our resources. The reality is that all these big enterprises were never really big. It was a sham, a farce that was created. It was a bogus situation, and we are now paying the price for many years that these kind of enterprises were proliferated in India. The last one, according to us, these entrepreneurs were the ones who came in the press on page 1, 2 and 3. They have been bad role models for the country. Many an entrepreneur emulated them, believing that that is the only business model in the country or the only method of doing business in India, which is gaming the system, cheating the system. They had an adverse impact on society at large because there was utter absence of good role models, because these people monopolized all the centers of power, all the platforms of attention. So India has paid a huge price by having these kind of fraudulent corporates monopolizing the entire economy. And now with their downfall, we need to create a new system where these kind of enterprises do not breed. If we do not take a fresh start where these kind of fraudulent enterprises do not breed, in that case, the huge price that we have paid will go waste. And the correction or the start of a new era where fraudulent enterprises do not cheat the country, it has to start at the end of the Babu, at the end of the Neta, at the end of the bureaucrat, at the end of the banker. Because only because all of them colluded that the bogus industrialists could create such a huge farce, hoping to get away with it. And in fact, they got away with it many a time. So the change has to start by those who are in power. Let's see whether this huge cost that we have paid will motivate them in order to start, in order to become a new leaf. This is Akhilesh Bhargava signing off till we meet again. Namaskar.
Now be the first to know about the latest updates on our new news app. Go on your Android or iOS, search for HW News Network. Download our app, choose the language you prefer to get updates in, and be up to date with the latest news.